Hey guys, so today in this video I wanted to go through probably one of the most popular questions that I get asked, aside from what pair of skates or sticks should I get next, and that's going to be, is it too late for me to learn ice hockey? I get this question all the time from people that are teenagers, from adults, and I think the best way to answer the question essentially is to figure out what you're trying to achieve. If you are 17 years old, you've never been on the ice before, and you want to play in the NHL, that's highly unlikely. I'm not going to say that it's not possible, because I've seen people go from complete novices in terms of their ability on the ice to playing pro in a very short amount of time. Some people are gifted, they just have it, and they find the most direct path to be able to get them to their goal. But for the vast majority of us, that's highly unlikely. Now, if your goal is to get onto the ice, pick up a new hobby, learn how to play the sport proficiently, or even to just a nice decent level, and in my opinion, joining one of the best communities on the planet, the hockey community, then absolutely that is definitely something that pretty much anyone can do. Provided your body allows you to, you're healthy enough to be able to get on the ice and play, you have the facilities and also the desire to learn and the patience to learn and develop. It doesn't matter how old you are, there is no such thing as being too old to start getting into the sport of ice hockey. Now, I've said this in many videos if you're unaware of it. I first got onto the ice fully kitted out in hockey equipment in my 20s. So if I'm not saying by any means that I'm a fantastic player, I'm as beer league gets, but I have said this numerous times. The closest friends I have around me today, I've met all through playing hockey. They're scattered all over the world. Some of them are also in the UK that I spend pretty much all of my time with when I'm not working with my family, and that's all come through playing hockey. If I didn't get into the game when I did, I wouldn't have such a tight group of lads around me that I do have today. So doesn't matter how old you are, if you want to play, you have the desire, you have the able body to allow you to play, then get on the ice and do it. Don't waste any more time. Now, quite naturally, that's going to lead on to some of the things that don't allow us to play hockey. A lot of us out there do really want to play the game, but for whatever reason, these are massive reasons out there, something might be preventing you from being able to get into the sport. If you don't have an ice rink around you for starters, that's going to make it pretty challenging to be able to play hockey. I know there's plenty of countries out there in the world that have no ice surfaces for people to play on, but hopefully there are other hockey communities around. Whether that's ball or deck hockey, inline hockey, field hockey, I'm just joking, that's not real hockey. I'm joking again, but what I always get being in the UK, the I'm hockey, this isn't a plug, but I guess it's an indirect plug, the I am hockey sweatshirts and hoodies that we have, I always get asked by people in the UK, oh, you play hockey, but they mean field hockey. But in Scandinavia, North America, if someone sees that you play hockey, they assume it's ice hockey. I just thought I'd explain that. That kind of hopefully reflects the popularity of ice hockey in the UK, that field hockey is where people's minds go here, but I digress. There are hopefully other forms of hockey that you can get into if your country doesn't have an ice surface for you to play on. A quick side note as well, if you're a hockey team, I think one of the other biggest deterrents for people getting into the game is players not being able to find out who to speak to. You go to the rink, especially here in the UK, and normally the people that play hockey aren't there when the sun's out during the daytime. They're there at night. So you speak to the receptionists or whoever's there, and nobody ever seems to know who to contact or how to reach out to the rec teams or the beer league teams that are around to even inquire about if they're willing to take on beginners. Now, I think a really easy way to get around this is most rinks have a bulletin board, some sort of notice board. If you just stick like a little pamphlet there that just has the name of the team, maybe a telephone number, a Facebook page, an email address for somebody to be able to reach out to, that they can see there all the time. I think something like that is so easy for players to be able to look at and then know at least where to go to contact the right people. It took me months when I was trying to learn how to play hockey to be able to speak to anyone at all. You would send an email to an address that was written down by someone in the reception on paper, the email bounces because it's not the right address, you go back, there's no one to speak to, and eventually you give up because you don't know how to contact the teams. So if there's any way that you guys feel like that's something that your team would be willing to do, I really think it would go a long way with a lot of players that are trying to reach out and connect with new teams. And another important point is, I know a lot of hockey teams out there, even if they're just recreational, they're not competitive, they're just beer league teams, don't like to take on beginners because they don't want the dead weight. Now, I've heard a lot of teams say this, and I think that's brutal because at the end of the day, there are so many occasions that you walk into an arena, you get into the locker room and there's like 4 people sat there and you've got an hour and a half of ice and you're like, great, no one's shown up. That wouldn't happen if there were more players. Now, I know beginners aren't going to be able to keep the pace of the game moving as fast as some players might like it to, But if you give them a chance, they will learn and they will develop. And with the right help, the right guidance, the right motivation and constructive criticism, they will be decent players within just a few months. And then the pace of the game will speed up. And it also means that you have more bodies there. So you reduce the chances of walking into the locker room and finding not enough players there to play a scrimmage. I think teams being open to receiving beginners is a big one as well. I know that you don't want to slow the pace of the game down, but at the end of the day, if you are encouraging for beginners, if you give them means to contact you and try to learn the game and, join your group, join your community, it means that you're going to essentially be contributing to adding more hockey players to the community. Now that seems like, oh, that's like such a cool thing to say, like you're just chatting, but think about it. At the end of the day, in a lot of places, hockey isn't growing in numbers. Those that are playing hockey, and there is a lot of people that want to play, and because of the points in this video, aren't playing hockey. So any team that's out there that should really be trying to introduce new blood into the team, into the community, to make sure that there's always a growing population of players in our arenas, in our rinks, in our countries. Now, hopefully that's something that you guys can do. And again, that notice board sign, having a means of players to be able to see, oh, there's the local hockey team, that's how I can reach out to them. I feel like that will go a really, really long way. And I know when I was starting out, that was something that would have helped me miles and miles. The only reason I actually got onto the ice the first time is because I met a player playing on one of these outdoor rinks in city centres, messing around. And he played for a team and he brought me to the rink with his team, and that's when I first signed up. If that hadn't happened, I might not be playing hockey and this channel might not exist. So please guys, welcome beginners and help them. Now, while I was kind of planning to shoot this video, I also asked you guys, what are some of the things that are preventing you from playing hockey? One of the major ones that came up was cost. Now, that is definitely one that in a lot of cases can be unavoidable. If you're talking about the costs of the ice, the costs of training, the costs of registering for a team and playing and insurances, depending on where you are in the world, those are pretty much unavoidable costs. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Hockey is one of the most privileged sports in the world because it is not cheap. It doesn't matter how you look at it, it's not cheap. And funny enough, I always thought that being in a country that hockey is quite rare, that's one of the reasons it was so expensive. But as I've heard from a lot of people that play in Vancouver, in Quebec, in Toronto, if anything, it's more expensive there. I suppose it's more of a business over there, so it's treated as such. So it seems it doesn't really matter where you go. If you're not playing on natural frozen surfaces outside where, it's free, hockey is expensive. Now, with the equipment, there are ways of getting around it. Now, that nicely leads on to the equipment as well. As I said, that was one of the top reasons that was preventing a lot of people from playing. When I did a questionnaire on Instagram, you guys responded with a bunch of responses. But one of the most reoccurring reactions or responses was the cost of the equipment, or just the cost in general. With gear, if you're looking at what the manufacturers are advertising, it's going to cost a lot of money to pick up a pair of skates, to pick up a good stick. But what I always recommend people do is look at a few years prior to what's been released now. So if we're in 2024, for example, look at what was released in 2020, 2021. It's still a flagship model. It's still from one of the flagship brands, but it means that the cost is going to be significantly less. It would be a better option rather than buying a current model of skates or stick and going 3 or 4 models below to save some money. You could go 3 or 4 years or seasons before and pick up something that's flagship model level that will have a lot more features, a lot more refinements, a lot more comfort. I think that's one of the things that people get caught up in. It's like the whole mobile phone thing. You see the latest iPhone and you want to pick it up because it's the one that everyone's talking about, but there are so many instances where that might not even be worth you upgrading to. And that can be said for a lot of the equipment that gets dropped. We create videos that shares the differences all the time to highlight them so you guys can make your own informed decisions on if you want to spend the money and upgrade. Now, aside from the cost, one of the other points that kept on coming, through a bunch of different players from all over the world, they were all saying the same thing. It was the confidence and also what the team was like. I know a lot of people that have gone out and registered, joined a team, got the equipment, turned up to train, and the kind of interactions that they had with some of the players on a team really discouraged them from kind of going back to the sport. And I think that's one of the most kind of like undermined points that really does keep people away from joining the game. The level of confidence that people have to walk into a locker room. If you've been playing hockey your entire life or for a long time, or if you know everyone that's on the team, think about a new person walking into a locker room filled with 25, 30 guys and not knowing a single person there. And then on top of that, having some sort of a negative interaction with a few of the players there, or even maybe one of the players there. That can be incredibly off-putting, and it's something that does deter a lot of people from continuing playing hockey. They have a really negative experience and they decide, you know what, I'm out. Now, if you're on a team with 25, 30 players, that's, something that can be potentially unavoidable. You're not always going to get on with everyone. But I think it's important to say, from my experience at least in hockey, I've encountered a hell of a lot more positive people, more just great people to be around than I have encountered horrible ones. Now, I'm not saying those people don't exist, because trust me, they do, but saying that I have encountered more positive people that I enjoy being around versus the ones that kind of make you not want to turn up to training. I think this dynamic is something that you just have to deal with in a team. If you're playing for a team or you're in a team, the different characters, the different personalities, you're not always going to be able to get on with everyone. But what you do find is they might be a team that is better suited to your personal style, the way that you are, the way that you communicate, the way that you like to be communicated to. That's something that you might have to spend a bit of time, training or practicing with different teams, because not all teams are the same. A lot of them can be polarizingly different from each other. So don't let a negative interaction keep you from playing the sport and kind of, finding your ropes and finding your footing to see if this is something that you want to really pursue and, adopt as one of the hobbies in your life. But I have to say that don't let a negative interaction put you off, because I've experienced the same things. It's a funny scenario where the more videos I make and the more the channel grows, the less hockey I get to play during the week, because we spend all our time on the ice filming. The only time I actually get to play is when I'm in Finland and, there's no cameras and we're not trying to make a video. We're just there for a few days to have fun. And that's some of the best times that I experience. Or when I'm in Belgium at the Indoor Pond Hockey Classics in Antwerp and I just get to have fun and play hockey. But even for myself, and as much as I've kind of found my footing and, grown through this sport, trying to connect with a new team, because the team that we used to train with, which was our own scrimmage slot, is no longer, it doesn't exist anymore. And right now we're going through the process of trying to figure out if we're going to start training with other teams so we can play some scrimmages during the week. And that's actually a little bit jarring for me myself, because walking into a locker room where you aren't familiar with 99% of the people in there is something that can knock your confidence. And if I'm going through it myself right now, I can't imagine what someone that is just stepping out onto the ice for the first time is going through themselves. So but just don't let that deter you, and just keep in mind that not all teams are the same. If you really don't get on with one and it's not a solution that can be rectified, move on to another team. Where were we? Okay, so from there, I definitely also wanted to touch on training slot times. Now, this is something that I honestly thought was just unique to the UK, but it turns out that this is something that a lot of beer leagues, recreational players experience all over the globe. Training is normally always during the midweek, Monday to Friday, at stupid o'clock. Like, for example, that's probably one of the biggest things that's really interfering with me playing scrimmages during the week right now, because a lot of the ice slots don't start until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And the closest rink to me is 45 minutes to an hour. That means at best, I'm going to sleep at maybe 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And if I'm waking up early for work the next day or for a flight, it's just not practical to be able to do that. It's not something that I can do consistently every single week without it essentially having a very negative effect on my cognitive ability, for my stress, all of that. It's just not ideal. It doesn't fit my lifestyle and the amount of work that I have to get through in a week. Now, that is something that is really unavoidable. Now, this is what comes down to how determined you are to play hockey, because you might find that a rink an hour and 30 minutes away or an hour and 45 minutes away has a slightly better training time. But then obviously you've got to factor in the extra driving that you're doing and if it's worth it. The late night slots for hockey are one of the biggest deterrents for a lot of players out there, and it's why sometimes you walk into a locker room and it's a ghost town, because not everyone is able to make that commitment when they have family commitments, work commitments the next day. Now, that one is a difficult one to get over, and a lot of people will just take the sleep deprivation to be able to play the game. But the only thing I could suggest is maybe looking around again at other teams to see if another team has a slightly earlier slot, or if it's possible to go to a slightly further rink that might train a little bit earlier, but of course factor in the drive time to see if it even makes sense to do that. But I completely empathize with anyone that experiences this, because I'm in exactly the same boat myself right now. Now, one that I've definitely got to touch on is going to be the risk of injury. This is probably one that I know puts a lot of parents off from letting their kids play hockey or even their teens play hockey. And as an adult, it might be something that you of course don't want to experience, because if you've got a family to provide for, you've got a job to get up to in the morning, especially if you work a professional job where you have to wear a suit, you can't really go in missing a tooth, a black eye. It's not something that's going to be conducive to your job. Now, the way to avoid that is to, first of all, hopefully, coming back to the first point, the right team, the right players. People aren't going to be waving their sticks around, taking slap shots at people sitting in front of a net on their knees. It's, having the right people will massively reduce the risk of something happening. But the way to further reduce the risk is what equipment you're using. Spend money to be better protected in the equipment that you have on. Now, of course, I've got a video that I filmed that goes through different brands of equipment. Something I'll recommend watching is going to be the best value stick and skates of 2024. I'll link that down below. But there's a bunch of other videos that we've got. Mouth guards, make sure you have one. Best ones that I've come across are True Fit. Those are custom ones. I'll link those down below so you can check out the video. They don't blow your bank balance up. They're custom. The most protective mouth guards I've personally used, and same with Tommy. Now, in terms of face protection, visor or a bubble. I know people don't want to use a fishbowl or a full cage or a half cage, but if you want to reduce the risk of you getting injured on the ice and you being able to go to work to provide for your family and not risk having to take time off work because of your hobby, using the best protection that you can get is always going to be the best way to reduce that. Now, that might mean spending a bit more on your actual shoulder pads, your leg pads, your shorts, your elbows, your gloves. But the one that I think you really don't want to cheap out on is going to be what you put on your head. Make sure that you have a good, tested, high-rated helmet. I'll link videos down below if you want to see about the different tests that are out there that get carried out. And of course, make sure that you've got something that covers the entire of your face. I know a visor is cool, or having nothing at all is even better. But if you're trying to reduce the risk of injury, you want to increase the amount of protection you put on your body. That's really going to be the ultimate way to do it. Now, other injuries on the ice are probably going to be unavoidable, if I'm being completely honest. If you twist something or you break something, you're playing a contact sport. The other way that you can maybe bear that in mind is don't play check-in hockey. I can't really say don't play contact hockey, because there's always going to be a bit of contact in hockey, but don't play with a team or in a league that actually allows players to hit. Because if you don't want to get injured, not getting hit is going to be a great way to be able to reduce that from happening. But at the end of the day, you're playing one of the fastest and possibly one of the most aggressive games on the planet, so there's always going to be a risk of being injured. But of course, guys, if there's anything that you think that I've missed out, please leave it down below in the comment section. If there's anything that's kind of keeping you from playing hockey, comment down below and let us know, because somebody in the comments or I myself might be able to suggest a few things to help you get around that. Once more, with the equipment side of things, don't feel like you have to buy the latest and greatest. That's going to be one of the reasons that people think hockey is so expensive. If you go into pretty much 90% of stores that are out there, they're going to have the latest and greatest stuff, and you're going to look at the prices and go, whoa. But there are plenty of online places, whether it be Sideline, eBay, Gumtree, Craigslist, depending on where you are in the world, lots of different places you can go to source hockey equipment at much lower prices, whether it's going to be equipment from a few years back that's still, elite level, so it's going to have the right refinements, the right comforts, the right protection, the right support. That's always worth looking at. So things like eBay, Gumtree, Craigslist, depending on where you are, don't feel like those aren't good places to be able to find quality equipment. Of course, warranties and stuff like that aren't something that you're going to get, but this is a way for you to reduce the amount that you're spending. And also, if you comment down below, because there's a lot of stores out there that I've seen starting to sprout now that specialize in selling brand new equipment, but from 2 to 3 years or even 1 year ago, which means that their prices are way, way lower than some of the stores that are, of course, selling the latest stuff that's just been released. So if there's any stores that you can think of in your particular country that does that, comment them down below, because I know that will help out a lot of people, because those stores don't get to advertise, I guess, as much as some of the other bigger chain stores. So it's worth giving them a mention, because they have some great stuff at great prices that will really help a lot of people out. Now, another poll or question that I dropped on Instagram was to ask you guys what you wish you knew prior to playing hockey. So if you could go back in time to when you first stepped on the ice, first bought your equipment, what would you want to know then that you know now? I'll put some of the responses up on the screen here, but there's some pretty good ones there. A lot of the ones that I see reoccurring is tying into what I've just previously said about buying equipment. Buying secondhand or buying really entry-level stuff might not always be the best way. It's why I always suggest buying, doesn't have to be necessarily top, but elite level equipment, but from a few years back. I think that is the sweet spot where you get the most value for money, the most bang for buck. And I feel like a lot of players did make the mistake of buying the most cheap equipment that they could to get them onto the ice to see if hockey was going to be something that they like. When, you know, deep down you knew, regardless of if this was painful or if it was hard or if I got hurt, I'm still sticking to it. That's kind of the mindset that I had. I didn't care. And I got hurt plenty. But something I've definitely got to mention is there are certain pieces of equipment that you can get away with not spending so much money on. For me personally, I would say something like gloves and also leg pads you can get away with if you're not blocking shots, which I don't think any beginners are going to probably be doing. Maybe accidentally, but not intentionally. Shorts as well, I'd say you kind of have to invest a bit of money there to make sure you have the right protection and comfort. And then shoulder pads for sure, I would prefer to get something high end, but that's another area that you could definitely spend a little bit of money on. Elbow pads I tend to not try and cheap out on because if they're uncomfortable, they are very uncomfortable. And elbows just seem to be one of the places one of the sweet spots that you'd always injure when you fall down as you're kind of finding your ropes on the ice. But your helmet and your skates, I think, are the two most important things that you do not want to cheap out on. The cost of a helmet doesn't really relate to the amount of protection it's giving you. That's something that I wish I knew at the beginning, because I went in and I got the most expensive helmet that I could, assuming that that meant it was going to be the most protective helmet. Now, I think with different protective equipment out there in the world, that does make sense, and that you know, theory or rule of thumb works, but with helmets in hockey, it doesn't. You can find a $100 helmet or a $90 helmet has a better safety rating than a $300-400 helmet. Now, the way that these helmets are tested, that's a completely separate video that I have filmed in the past, and I will link it down below. But what I'm saying is you want to go with a helmet that you know from speaking to people, from doing research, from using Google, from watching reviews, is a high-rated helmet that is a protective helmet. Don't go off of what NHL players are using, because a lot of the times they will use what is comfortable, not what is protective. They're not going to go with the safest option, they're going to go with the most comfortable option or what they prefer. So please always bear that in mind. Now with skates, this is an area that I would really recommend not cheaping out, because if you are in pain, if you get blisters, if you get bower bumps or any kind of foot ailments because of using a pair of skates that are poorly fitted or poorly constructed, you are going to be miserable on the ice, and it's not going to encourage you to get back on and be excited for training and want to develop further and learn more. Having a pair of skates that you are not thinking about when you're on the ice, you can just skate and play, and the last thing you're thinking about is, ow, my feet hurt. That will be a godsend and really help to keep your mind focused on what it actually needs to be focused on, which is developing as a player, learning the game, and most importantly, enjoying yourself. Skates definitely don't cheap out. I've got a bunch of videos down below where we break down the different brands, the different models within the brands, which ones might be good for different types of players, how much you should be considering spending on a pair of skates for the first time. I'll link all those videos down below in the video description, but please, 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 helmet, make sure you get a protective one based on ratings and reviews, not based on how popular the helmet is. And then skates, don't cheap out, get something that's comfortable so you can enjoy your experience and you can learn and you can be productive on the ice. Now, hopefully this is a video that you guys enjoyed, you've taken something away from it. Big thank you for watching, guys, and don't forget to thumbs up and subscribe if you like this type of content. And happy holidays, guys. Based on the time of year, happy holidays, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.